Watching.
Hey, Brooksy.
Okay. Well, Sonia, we're here now.
Okay.
So we'll just start here. Sorry, everyone out there, for thinking I know how Zoom and Facebook tie together and work together. Every time it seems like it's something different. But hi, this is Felicia Johnson, and we are one-on-one this evening with Sonia Fonticella. And if you don't know who she is, you're going to find out about her right now. And she is a candidate for the Second Judicial District for Prosecuting Attorney. I know that that covers Craighead County, and Ms. Fonticella, can you tell us where else?
Yeah, it's Clay, Green, Craighead, Poinsett, Mississippi, and Crittenden County. So it's a huge district.
Fantastic, fantastic. About how many constituents or voters are in those counties?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I know that geographically it's the largest in the state, and I think on average we usually are right below Pulaski County as far as caseload goes.
Okay, very good, very good. So, everybody, this is Miss Sonia Fonticella. She is going to be with us tonight for 101. Again, she is running for the prosecuting attorney position, the Second Judicial District, which is Craighead County and some other counties as well. We'll reiterate where those counties are and all that. But I want you to specifically talk to us about your parents and Mr. Albert and Miss Sonia, and you being a first generation American and what that means to you.
Yeah, I mean, so my parents are they immigrated from Cuba legally. They were refugees from the communist regime there, and my grandparents on my dad's side. My dad was 5 years old. He came over in one of the last legal freedom flights that came over from Cuba, right as Castro was taking over and converting the government to communism. And then my mom was born into it, so she didn't come until she was 17, and she came in 1980 with the Mariel Bay boat lift. So if anybody's ever watched Scarface, the beginning of the movie shows actual footage of boats coming across from Cuba that were people that were legally able to come over on those boats. And that's how my mom got here, was on she was on a shrimp boat that came over.
Okay.
And what they did was on the Mariel Bay boat lift was, for every one person that you bought a ticket for to get out of the country, like a family member, you had to buy two others. And those people were from like the prisons and the insane asylums in Cuba. So, I mean, it was pretty rough.
Right.
Coming over. But so my family from from when I was a baby have always instilled in me that like freedom is so important, and your right to vote is so important, and all the things that we as Americans are guaranteed under our Constitution and our God-given rights to freedom here, they didn't have. So I knew growing up that was very important and something to value, honor, and hold dear and fight for. So to be a candidate for prosecuting attorney as first generation American, I know my grandfather and my grandmother who passed would be like just ecstatic. So and the American values that they instilled in us, even though they weren't originally from here, like my grandfather, I would ask him, what was it like in Cuba? What was it like when it was changing? And he's like, you don't need to worry about any of that. You were born here. This is your home. This is your country. We're American.
Very good.
So
that's a wonderful story. So tell me about your parents, Mr. Albert or Miss Sonia. How are they feeling, and how have they helped you through life and now in the campaign?
Well, so my parents have always been very supportive. I'm very lucky. I know that it's not the case for everybody to have two like wonderful, supportive parents, but I do. And I know that, especially after practicing criminal defense for as long as I have, I know how important it is that the parental roles are in shaping somebody. And they've always been really supportive in what I've done, have encouraged me to push myself and get outside my comfort zone. And my dad actually is like my best campaigner right now. So my dad's a doctor, and when we moved to Arkansas, I was in second grade. So I'm basically, I consider myself an Arkansan. But but he has been my best campaigner because my dad's like the old school kind of doctor that will sit and actually like talk to you for a long time.
Mhm.
And so he knows everybody. So I go anywhere I go, even if my dad's not with me, people are like, how's Doc doing? Like,
How's Doc? Well, how is Doc doing?
Doc is doing great. You know,
Yeah.
I joked around with him. I was like, I'm glad I'm not running against you because I'd get my rear handed to me if it was
Yeah.
you. But
So I know that you and your husband share 6 children.
mhm.
Can you tell us how campaigning with the family has been?
You know, it's been really good. You know, it's tough sometimes. Like I'm that kind of mom that doesn't want to miss a ball game, and I want to, you know, do stuff with them and be involved. And you know, and I have had to miss a couple ball games to be at places or events, things like that. But my like the kids have been really involved. Like, I mean, my one of my sons was out at the polls this afternoon with my parents, waving at people with signs saying "Vote for my mom,"
Yeah.
and that just like it's just really really special to see them support me as well.
So I know as I was growing up, and I'm about almost 45 years old, our parents told us about voting and we kind of tuned into elections and all that. But of course, it wasn't until I got older that voting really became important. I really started paying attention um, to the issues. And now I have a almost 25-year-old who has always voted. I remember when Barack Obama was voted in for his first term, how excited I was, that he was a Black man. It was a historical moment. And here she is. She's like, "What's the big like? What's the big deal
Yeah.
here?" Because this is the American dream. Y'all have always taught us that we can be and do anything that we want to be and do. And the one thing that I've always kind of thought was, running for public office, your children are getting this firsthand view of what also of what the American dream is. Like, look at my mother, and I'm also getting this civic lesson that a lot of people don't get to have. Can you
Yeah.
tell us about that and how your kids feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, they love it. So, you know, I usually take my kids to go vote with me. And so I voted yesterday and
Okay.
I only had one kid with me at the time. So I took him in there and he pushed all the buttons for me and I made sure he did the ones we needed to.
Right.
And so they love it, you know, and I've done that since they were babies. So, you know, I've always taken them to the polls with me and made sure that they were involved. And, you know, I've never really been like real engaged in politics. I always pay attention enough to know who I'm voting for, um, but I've never really, you know, the judicial campaigns are the ones that I really would only ever get, you know, actively involved in.
Right.
Because the judiciary is just so important to me, especially as, you know, as a lawyer, and those judges races really directly impact you more than anybody even realizes.
Right.
But anyway, but yeah, this process has been really interesting to go through with them because they're seeing me do it. And like one of my daughters was at the debate we did at First National Bank back in, I think it was May. And I mean, she was just like all about it. Like she wanted to get up there and answer questions for me.
Yeah.
Afterwards, she was like, "Why couldn't I get up there and do stuff?" And I was like, "You're not the candidate, Ava Grace."
Well, she may be one day.
Can be one day. So,
yeah. So I think that's great because even though every child in her class may not have a mom or dad running for a position, your child is, and they can also learn from her what that is like. I think, I just think that's a very cool lesson and something very cool to see.
Yes, and I try to so I've been to high schools to speak. I guess sometime in the spring, I was asked to go to Nettleton and speak to a group of students that were doing mock trials, and it was a mock murder trial. So they brought me in to tell them how I prepare for trials.
Right.
And then last week I went and spoke to students at Jonesboro High School about, you know, being in a political race and what it means to be in a nonpartisan race and how you navigate those pitfalls. And so, you know, it not just with my own kids, but you know, I'm always open to any opportunity to talk to, especially young adults who are about to get into, or young adolescents, not adults yet, that are about to get that privilege to vote, the right to vote, and make sure that they understand our judicial process too. I mean, that's a lot of people just don't understand it. I mean,
And I think that also brings me to this question. I know that you are a defense attorney.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about being a defense attorney, what that's been like for you, anything about any of the cases you tried or anything that has stuck out for you? And then I'm going to ask you about running for prosecuting attorney.
Yeah, so I started my love for criminal law in a prosecutor's office in law school,
Okay.
and
At the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. Go
yes,
Hogs.
yes, I did, and I just loved it. I was enthralled in it, and I went to law school thinking I was going to be like some fancy international business lawyer, or whatever. I had kind of pie in the sky dreams of what that would look like. And my criminal law professor pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, I get to recommend a student for this internship at the prosecutor's office, and I want to recommend you." And I was like, "Why me? I want to be an international business lawyer." And he said, "No, you really need to go." And he was right. And his name is Professor Mullane. I love him, and I just fell in love with it. I love talking to people. I love hearing people's stories. And when I finally got out into private practice, it was during the recession, so like nobody was hiring, and I was pregnant, so it was like even worse.
Right.
But so I just decided to hang up my own shingle and practice law on my own, and I just gravitated towards criminal law. So I always did criminal law from the beginning, and I'm the weird, crazy lady that wakes up in the middle of the night and can't sleep and says, what true crime documentary can I watch now?" So
Oh, that's me too.
yeah. So I love it. I love trying to figure that out. And you come across people that you would never talk to in daily life. I don't interact with my clients outside of being their lawyer a lot, but I get to sit down with them for hours and hours and hours and really hear their stories and what their life was like and what led them to where they were, and how, what their decision-making process was. And, a lot of times I'm like, well, how are we going to fix this? Because your decision making is clearly not correct. Right. But I value those conversations because it gives me a perspective at looking at a defendant to know. I can usually tell within about 5 minutes if somebody's just a bad apple that needs to go sit down and be in prison, or if it's somebody that we can help and try to figure out what services we can get them. Okay. And so that's always at the forefront of my mind when I'm, on the defense side.
So what was the decision-making process for you, and then for you and your family, to switch from being a defense attorney to running for prosecuting attorney?
Well, so, I was actually calling around. I was working at the Craighead County Public Defender's Office part-time, and then I'm also a Criminal Justice Act lawyer, so I get appointed cases for indigent clients in federal court. So most of my practice has always been indigent defense, which I consider a public service. Like, it's, nobody's getting rich doing that, but I love it, so I do it, and I feel like I've done some good things there. But while I was in the public defender's office in Craighead County, I was just kind of, and I'm not dogging any of the deputy prosecutors, but like, I feel like we need to have a little more urgency with it. And then I started calling around to figure out, like, okay, who's going to run for prosecutor? Surely somebody has planned this a year in advance while I was pregnant with my last child and is already ready to go. Yeah. Who do I need to be backing? And I just wasn't really pleased with the candidates that were coming forward. And, and that's not a criticism,
right?
But I wanted to make sure that whoever was in that position had at the forefront of their minds that the job of the prosecuting attorneys is to seek the truth. And that's it. That's the job, right? Like, we have all these other little things that we talk about, like being tough on crime and, specialty courts and all that stuff. And that's all important to talk about. But the ultimate goal of the prosecutor's office is always to seek the truth. So I thought, like, I was talking to my husband, I talked to his friends and family, and I was like, look, if I'm not happy with what's going on in the prosecutor's office, I cannot complain about it if I'm not willing to do the job myself. I have the skills, I have the experience to do it, so why not? So here I am.
So if I could talk to you a little bit about how some, not all, this is not a general paintbrush for anybody,
Mhm.
in BIPOC communities, in Black and Brown communities, have sometimes a mistrust of the institution of the judicial system.
Mhm.
And I think that is also very important in terms of the prosecutor's office and what the goals are there. How do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile um, maybe having someone that you need to prosecute who already may feel like, hey, I this system is not set up for me. This system is not set up to be fair.
Mhm. Well, so I'm a rule follower. I tend to be a pretty strict rule follower. And there's a lot of rules out there that we don't have a consequence for, but I still follow them, even though I don't know that I'll be punished for it, right? So I think, like I said, the job is always to seek the truth. It's also, but you seek the truth by following the rules as they're laid out that everybody has to play by.
Mhm.
There cannot be like shady side deals or like everything needs to be open and transparent, and that's why we have laws that say what prosecutors have to disclose, what the defense has to disclose, and things like that. And if we're not all following those same rules, then that's where the distrust, I think, starts to break down. And I promise that I will be following those rules because I've seen them not followed before, and I've seen it affect people's lives negatively. And I don't, that's not fair to our justice system to
Mhm.
do that. And I really respect it and feel like, we have to have respect for the court. People need to come to court dressed appropriately. Like, and I'm not saying you need to come in a three-piece suit, but you at least need to have taken a shower and brushed your teeth, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where people just don't have respect, where they come in their pajamas and stuff. Um, I mean, and that goes for lawyers too, right? Like, we need to be dressed appropriately. We need to be standing when the judge comes in, or those little formalities add up, and show a reverence to the process. And if everybody is feeling that like energy of being respectful of the process and the rules and why we have them set up the way they are, then that trickles down
Right.
to everybody else.
Okay. So, can you tell us if you're prosecuting someone and maybe someone's going to make a sentence recommendation or something like that? I guess we've heard in past that some families feel like they are not families of victims are not included on sentence recommendations or anything like that. So, is that something that you would consider if you're elected as prosecuting
Yeah, of
attorney?
course. I mean, that's the most important thing in their lives, right? Like, that's to maybe the deputy prosecutor, it's one of 500 cases, but that's the only thing going on in that person's life. And I know we've got some really good victim witness coordinators already in the prosecutor's office that do a good job of trying to communicate. Um, and I think that just needs to grow, and being communicative with everything. But I mean, it's tough to go through that as a victim, um, and not have like communication
Mhm.
with the prosecutor's office when they're making decisions. But
And to be fair to the prosecutor's office, there are still just some things that you are not able to share with the victim's family.
yes, so sometimes there will be things that will not be able to be shared, until the case is over. For example, like, if you've got cooperating witnesses and things like that, and you want to try to protect them until the case is over. That kind of thing obviously would not be something you'd want to just like jump up and share.
Mhm.
But the decision making process and the reasoning why should be explained. And I know we have good victim witness coordinators that do that. And I know I'm thinking of one prosecuting attorney in particular that I know in Craighead County that actually she's very, very good at making sure that the victims' families know when the hearings are and what's going on. So, her leadership in doing that, I think, if it's needed to spread, she would be a good person to go to for it. And
Good,
I would
good.
encourage everyone to do that.
So can you talk to us? Because I know we feel like and think we've come out of COVID. But can you tell us what your caseload looked like pre-COVID and now kind of post-COVID, and how, as the prosecuting attorney, you would try to manage those cases?
Yeah. So I believe a lot of the backlog has started to dissipate.
Clear. Good.
But my caseload was insane. We did a lot of Zooms. We did a lot of virtual things that for cases. It was hard in the beginning, like the first 6 months, but it felt like, at least I was working at the Federal Public Defender's Office whenever COVID first hit. And we kind of got things like not fully back to normal with jury trials, but like all the other cases were kind of starting to be dealt with more smoothly when all the technology was incorporated to help us be able to even communicate with our clients, because there was a period of time where we couldn't even talk to them, the ones that were incarcerated. So you can't move a case along if you can't talk to your client. But we have the one thing I've talked about a lot while I've been campaigning is that, and this is just in general, but I think it will help with the COVID issue as well, is we have a limited number of days on the calendar for criminal trials. There's different trial terms throughout the year with different judges. There's a limited amount of courtroom space. There's a limited amount of judges. We have to maximize that time and try cases that need to be tried during those times. I saw way too often where we'd have a 2-week trial term and I'd be like, well, what case do I need to be ready for? Like, tell me who's on your hit list, for lack of a better term. And nobody knew. Nobody could figure it out. So I can't get ready for a trial if you tell me the day before.
Right.
That's not going to work. So, that's one thing that I really want to tackle, and there's several reasons for doing that. One is to be efficient, right? And to be respectful of the court's time and use it accordingly. And then 2, if you're trying cases and you're making sure that the public knows, like, we're not putting up with certain things, get ready to go.
Right.
Then you end up lowering your numbers on your caseload because people are scared. They're like, oh, well, this jury gave this guy like 40 years for whatever it is. I'm going to take this 30-year offer. So it's twofold. One, you clear cases that need to be tried, and 2, you send a message to those that want to offend that we're not messing around.
What are your goals for the prosecuting attorney's office if you are elected next Tuesday?
1, trials, making sure we're trying cases and being efficient about bringing those. 2 is really working with specialty courts, so like veterans courts, drug courts, STAR courts, which are the DWI courts, and mental health court. I want to make sure that we're efficiently using those as much as possible. And 3, and this isn't really like directly in the purview of the prosecutor's office, but I think sentencing in Arkansas is backwards. The way that our parole system works does not work it just doesn't work for our communities, because somebody might get a 10-year sentence, but if they're getting 2 months on the year, then they're out in like 18 months or so. That's not truth in sentencing. If you want to say somebody's going to get a 10-year sentence but they only do 18 months, just say it's an 18-month sentence.
Right. Okay.
So it makes it confusing to the public, and I think it fosters that distrust that we talked about, because it doesn't make any sense when you think somebody who committed a violent crime and got a 10-year sentence
10 years,
out on the street like the next day.
Right.
And that does a disservice to our law enforcement officers too, because they're like rearresting people a bunch of times for things that they shouldn't be doing, and they're already under a lot of stress. So how important is it for the prosecuting attorney's office to have good working relationships with local law enforcement? Oh, it's like top priority, one of the most important things. So I'm the only candidate in this race, even when there were 3 of us, that has been endorsed by any law enforcement. And I've had 2 county sheriffs come out, and I've spoken to just about, well, not all, but most of the police departments, and that's something that's high priority for them. They want communication, they want some interaction, and a more streamlined process to do that. And I'm 100% for that. So the goal of making sure that continues to happen and happens more efficiently and effectively is a top priority for me.
So I am a constituent in Craighead County, and I know that over the last few years, the numbers of violent crimes alone in our county seems to be rising. I guess when you look at the population as a whole, it is not outrageous. But sometimes when you see something violent has happened, a murder, a robbery, you get people on Facebook that are calling us Little Memphis, Little Chicago, things like that. And of course, when you look at numbers for numbers, that isn't exactly true. However, violent crime in our areas is increasing. And we know it's increasing just because population is increasing and things like that. How does the prosecuting attorney's office look at those crimes as they go up and say, hey, this is something that we need to be talking about with law enforcement to see if we can cut some of this down before it gets to us? Is that something that the prosecuting attorney's office would be doing?
Yes. So, and then I know like some of the bigger law enforcement agencies in our district have been like communicating with each other to try to come up with a violent crime task force or organized crime task force.
Okay.
And that's a conversation I want to be involved in if I'm elected, because I want to make sure we know where they're coming from. So what I'm hearing a lot is that, a lot of that violent crime is spilling over from Memphis into our district, and they come over, commit some crimes, and then hop back over the river. So we need to be figuring out where it's coming from so we can figure out where the bottleneck is and stop it there. And I think a lot of that's going to end up being Crittenden and Mississippi counties, which are right there on the river. But yeah, I mean, those are conversations that the prosecutor's office needs to be in. And the reason why is because we need to figure out if and when those priority cases come over, we say, okay, this guy has been doing this a lot. This is part of this organized crime ring or whatever it might be. This person we need to really focus in on. And, law enforcement's boots on the ground, right? Like they give us the cases. Right. They're the ones that are working them up and doing the hard work behind the scenes. Then they hand it over to the prosecutor's office, and it's the prosecutor's job to present that in court and make sure that justice is done with it, and tell the story of what the law enforcement officers have provided. So that communication is key, and I see a similar, there's a similarity to that in me representing my defendants, right? Like my criminal clients is I talk to my clients, I figure out what their story is, and it's my job to present what that story is and to seek justice. And that's not always a not guilty verdict, but you have to be able to present that information, and I know I can translate that over into being a prosecutor.
Very good. Can you tell me, do you know off the top of your head how many deputy prosecuting attorneys there are?
I believe there's 23 now, and that's
Okay.
That's a mix between part-time and full-time.
Okay.
And we have a lot of part-time deputies, and it's kind of a necessity to have some part-timers because of the budget and how the salaries all end up going. But one of the things that I would need to work on if I'm elected is trying to get more funding from the state so we can hire more full-time deputies.
Right. So does the hiring of more full-time deputies, is that something like if the caseloads are so much, or how do you
all that needs to be
that?
presented? All that needs to be presented and discussed with the prosecutor's coordinator's office in Little Rock,
Okay.
and to try to get more funding for those salaries. And then
Okay.
the counties provide some funding for some things, but the salaries are paid by the state. So
okay. And so will you tell, let's say that this is a voter's first time hearing you, seeing you, they're going to go and early vote tomorrow, or they're early voting now, or they're going to wait until next Tuesday, November 8th, which is election day, everybody, to vote. Will you tell the people here that are listening and the people that are going to watch this later, while you're running, who you are and why they should vote for you?
Yeah, so I live here. I grew up in Northeast Arkansas, and and I see that rise in violent crime, and I see the struggles that we're facing, and I know I have the skills to help fix it. And You know, public service has always been really important to me. And I take my job as a lawyer very seriously. I'm honest, I'm ethical, and I work really hard. And I want to bring that integrity to the office and, you know, let the leadership of that trickle down to all the deputies and the staff below, and make it a good place to work. You know, I really, really believe in following rules, and I really believe in being ethical and being upfront and having transparency and integrity in everything that you do. You know, and one thing is that I always tell people is like, I'll be okay with disagreeing with you, and I'll always tell you how I feel and what the truth is. But at the same time, I'm always going to be open to being wrong. So if I need to tweak my view or change something, I'll be open to it. I love constructive criticism. It's the only way I think we get better. So, so I'd love to have your vote. And, you know, if anybody has any other questions for me, please reach out to me and send me a Facebook message, or you can call me at my office, leave me a message, and I'll call you back. But I'd love to have your vote. Thank you.
Everyone out there, I would just like to thank Ms. Fonticella for being here with us. She is the second judicial district, one of the second judicial district candidates for prosecuting attorney. I'm sure that she would love to have your vote during early voting, and especially if you can't make it to early voting. Election day is Tuesday, November 8th, which is next Tuesday. You will see her name on the ballot if you are in Clay, Craighead, Crittenden, Greene, Mississippi, and Poinsett counties. So I'll say that again for everybody, so they will know to be looking for you. Clay County, Craighead County, Crittenden County, Greene County, Mississippi, and Poinsett counties are in the second judicial district. So early voting is going on now. We wish you well. We wish you luck. And hopefully we'll be seeing and talking to you a lot more. Thank you for giving us your time.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.